Singapore is often referred to as one of the four Asian tigers for good reason. A country that was still underdeveloped back in the 1960s has made a leap to become one of the most advanced economies not only in Asia, but in the whole world. Today, Singapore consistently ranks in the top 10 of global macroeconomic and quality of life indices. What is most astonishing is that it has achieved this on a very small territory. Singapore is in fact the 20th smallest country in the world by land area, covering only 733 square kilometers. For comparison, this is 3 times smaller than Tokyo and half the size of London. It is no wonder that land is the most precious and expensive resource for Singapore. So how is Singapore dealing with land shortage, and how does it lead to conflicts with its neighbors? Let's get started. Since the city of Singapore began to emerge on the wetland 200 years ago, its land area has expanded by 27%. Although its borders with other countries remained unchanged, 578 square kilometers have turned into 733 square kilometers today. It all started in 1819. As soon as the British established control, they started draining the mangrove swamps to create suitable land for development. Within 100 years, the landscape had already undergone significant changes, but that was just the beginning. The first major reclamation project was the construction of Kallang Airport. From 1932 to 1936, 1.4 square kilometers of land were reclaimed for it. It was then hailed as a bold engineering project built on the most mosquito-infested swamps in the world and an aviation marvel of the East. The process later took on truly gigantic proportions within the country. After gaining independence in the 1960s, Singapore found itself on the brink of poverty. The government's goal was clear: transform tiny Singapore into the financial and trade hub of Asia, all within a very limited area, as the country faced a severe land shortage. This problem persisted since the 1960s because Singapore is situated on 63 islands. Such a tiny land area forced them to find new ways to conserve space and somehow increase it. In 1966, the East Coast Great Reclamation Project was launched. In 30 years, more than 1,500 hectares of new land were planned to be created in just one area of the city. The project was divided into 7 stages, gradually adding land. As a result, the area known to all tourists who have visited Singapore today, the famous Marina Bay, was created. How was this achieved from a technical standpoint? Singapore took the simplest approach. They just took more land and sand and filled it in a new location. The shallow depth of the water allowed this to be done. For the large reclamation project on the eastern coast, they cut down several neighboring hills to obtain the land. This wasn't enough, so they had to dig deeper. Now in that place there is a small reservoir called bedrock. After this, the excavated soil was transported on conveyor belts to the coast, where it was loaded onto barges and dumped into the sea on the territory that needed to be reclaimed. In the final stage, bulldozers and dump trucks leveled and compacted the newly created surface to its final level. The reclaimed land was used for the construction of residential and commercial properties. This was understandable because during the project's implementation, the population of the developing country doubled from 1.8 million to 3.6 million people in 1996. To connect the new areas with the rest of the city, a highway was built. And for the residents of the city, there are now 185 hectares of parkland and a picturesque 15-kilometer beach. As a result, today, Marina Bay is essentially the new center of the city with its stunning views of the waterfront, skyscrapers, mega hotels, and casino resorts. However, it is not only the eastern coastline that has undergone reclamation in Singapore's 50-year history. Near the former Kallang Airport, there were many marshlands that were filled with soil taken from other areas. On the western coast, the Clementi area was developed, with 89 hectares of new land created. In the Johor Strait, which separates Singapore from Malaysia, new areas also emerged. What we now see on the map is Jurong Island used to be a cluster of small islets until 1993. With a budget of $6 billion, they were transformed into an industrial zone covering 3,000 hectares, now home to more than 100 oil, petrochemical, and specialized chemical companies. One of the world's busiest airports, Changi, is also built on reclaimed land. The first phase began in 1975, and the airport expanded to its current size after another reclamation phase completed in 2006. However, every medal has 2 sides. Such extensive construction has meant the complete destruction of Singapore's coastal ecosystems. The coastal forests and mangrove swamps of the country have completely disappeared, and coral reefs are being destroyed. In addition, toxic chemicals present in most fill materials have polluted much of Singapore's marine ecosystems. But this is a price that the developing country is willing to pay without any hesitation. However, environmental concerns are not the only issue with Singapore's land reclamation. Far worse are the relationships with its neighbors. The expansion of territory into the sea implies the expansion of territorial waters. And in the case of Malaysia, the countries may simply collide. The recent diplomatic dispute involves the expansion of the Johor Bahru port and the construction of the commercial project Forest City in Malaysia. But Malaysians are not solely to blame for these conflicts. They are merely responses to Singapore's previous aggressive development. Singapore has also faced bans on sand exports from nearly all its closest neighbors: Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Cambodia. As a result, the country has redirected its sand imports to China, Myanmar, the Philippines, and has been strengthening its ties with India. It's worth noting that before the embargo, Indonesia lost over 24 sand islands, which were completely dredged. Rumors suggest that smuggling continues to this day, although Singapore officially maintains that all its sand imports are absolutely legal. All of this has led Singapore to seek new solutions in terms of expansion and efficient land use. Firstly, there is a shift in reclamation technology towards the Dutch method of creating polders on a large scale. In this case, a dam is constructed first, and then all the water is completely pumped out from the isolated area. The resulting pit can be filled with various materials, not just soil. Construction waste and sturdy concrete are suitable options. In Singapore, they are already reclaiming areas with water depths of up to 20 meters and are prepared to do so at even greater depths. Secondly, Singapore is implementing unique infrastructure projects designed to save the country's space while providing it with new opportunities. For example, in 2021, a floating solar power station was launched on the Tenjie Reservoir. Its area is equivalent to the size of 45 football fields, making it one of the largest in the world. Another example is an 8-story fish farm with a capacity of up to 3,000 tons annually. The cost of fish production in such a system is twice as high as conventional methods. But in this case, the saved land is much more valuable. Thirdly, the country leases or purchases land in other countries to ensure its food supply. For example, Singapore has been actively investing in the agricultural industry in China for the last 10 years. There may be many methods to solve the problem of lack of territory, but one thing is clear: Singapore has no intention of stopping. The goal is to expand its territory by 30% of the original area by 2030, which means reclaiming about 2,000 hectares of land. In parallel with this, underground expansion is also being explored. While everything remains in the project and discussion stages, Singaporean authorities are considering the possibility of constructing underground industrial and commercial facilities. Additionally, tunnel road networks are being planned. The idea of building structures on water is also being cautiously considered, but so far more for tourist purposes rather than as actual residential properties. Furthermore, the story with sand is not over yet. With the melting glaciers in Greenland, large deposits have been exposed there as well. If the transportation costs become feasible, Singapore is already prepared to make purchases. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the Kara Show channel. Also, check out our previous videos. Goodbye.